Morning, all. All right, so I want to do something a little different today. All-Star break and all of that. So, right now, if the playoffs started today, according to the NHL standings, this is who we would get. Now, I'm not worried about points percentage because people will bring up points percentage because points percentage, it brings into account games in hand, and we don't know if teams are going to win games in hand or not. I know some of the NHL standings, you'll see games in hand make a difference too, so this is just the official standings right now, who would play who. And I really think, and I say this a lot, I understand this might be year-to-year thing, man, these playoffs could be absolutely sensational. So we would have Florida against Boston. So you'd have a team that hasn't made it out of the first round since 96 against a team that's veteran that won the Cup in 2011, made it to the finals in 2019, and doesn't generally lose in the first round that often. So there's a storyline right there. And then, of course, you have the incredible storyline of what Florida's been able to do this year, the amazing run they've been on. And on the other side, you have Boston that, again, it feels like there's a last hurrah. They've brought Tuukka Rask back with the idea of that last run. I think, anyways, that's the plan. I think Florida probably wins that series, but it'll be a lot of fun. Then, as well in the Atlantic, you have Tampa Bay, number 2, and Toronto, number 3 in the division. And Tampa right now would have home ice. And again, you get into points percentages, that might very well change. But how much fun would that be? So you'd have a two-time defending Stanley Cup champion against the Toronto Maple Leafs, a team that hasn't won the Cup since 67, hasn't made it out of the first round since 2004. That series could be absolutely fantastic. Like, that could be, it could be a 7-game series, and I apologize to Leaf fans. They're going to say, oh, not another Game 7. Yeah. And it would be in Tampa, again, if Tampa's the number 2 seed. I think there's a lot of importance for Toronto this second half of the year to hopefully, in their eyes anyways, get home ice advantage. So if there's a Game 7 situation, you could be playing it at home in front of Toronto fans. That's the ultimate right situation for them that I don't think they've really had that opportunity. 2020 you're at home, but really? So it's the 2020 bubble playoffs were a different situation altogether. I would love to see Toronto with home ice in a Game 7, which is something that we haven't seen. Boston had home ice in both situations. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with that, but that could be a really fun series if that comes to pass. Also in the East, you have the number 1 team in the Metropolitan Division, Carolina, against the first wild card, and the number 1 wild card currently is Washington. These teams know each other really well. So we would see them play against each other again, the Capitals with a chance to take out Carolina, and Carolina with a chance to once again take out Washington and start their march towards what could be a really nice long playoff run. That's the plan anyways. And the interesting thing is that in the Atlantic, all 4 teams, I think, are envisioning a long playoff run. And in the Metro, I think all 4 of them are too. So that can make for some really intense hockey. There's no team, I don't envision anyways, that's just happy to be there. I don't see any of these teams after losing in the first round saying, well, it was fun to be here, and we had a chance, and we didn't make it, and that's okay. I really think these teams all envision a long playoff run. And the number 2 and number 3 teams in the Metro are the New York Rangers, Pittsburgh Penguins. Teams that are no stranger to one another either. Haven't met in the playoffs in a while, but I would anticipate a very intense series. The goaltending could really be in the spotlight. Remember, last year Tristan Jarry did not play well in that first round loss for Pittsburgh. Now he'd be against Shesterkin. And you'd have this incredible series where special teams could be huge. The Rangers' power play has been excellent most of the season. Pittsburgh's is picking it up and getting a lot better. That could be one heck of a series too. And the interesting thing to me too is I could see any of the series in the East going full 7, and I could see a lot of overtime, and it honestly lots and lots of fun. I'm really looking forward to the playoffs this year, and the East to me has a little bit of an edge over the West, but the West not too shabby either. Number 1 in the Central is the Colorado Avalanche. The number 2 wild card in the West, who would play against them right now would be Calgary. So you have that rematch from 2019. And that could be a lot of fun. This could be a situation where if Gaudreau hasn't signed an extension and he's still there, is that his last hurrah? And would that perhaps drive him to have a really good playoff? And then you'd have Markstrom against Kemper. And the question about, is Colorado's goaltending good enough, which we've heard the last couple of seasons anyways, even when Grubauer was there. And I mean it from a playoff perspective. I understand regular season he was nominated for Vezina, but there was still that conversation had after Colorado gets knocked out in the second round about whether or not Grubauer was going to be that cup to, or that goaltender to get that cup for the Colorado Avalanche. And so now Kemper's in there, and we'll see what happens, right? So yeah, that could be a very intense series, and then Calgary would be looking to upset the number one seed, like they were upset when they were the number one seed. Writes itself. Then you have Nashville against Minnesota, and with them number 2 and number 3, thankfully the logos are facing each other instead of looking like they're running away from each other. So for me, this series would be a battle between one that does rely on its goaltending, plays very good defense, some very opportunistic, good offense, against a team that is exciting. They play a very up-tempo game. They have one of the most exciting players in the league in Kaprizov and can score in bunches. And their goaltending, not bad. Talbot's had his ups and downs, but again, he's been good enough that I think that can help them win a round. Minnesota isn't just happy to be here either. I think Minnesota wants to go on a run. So does Nashville. Nashville, from day one, it looks like they have something to prove. And so far, they've proven they're at least a playoff team, and then it's a matter of whether or not they're a postseason team as well. Number one team in the Pacific is Vegas. The number one wild card is St. Louis. If this was the matchup that took place, I would expect a lot of people to pick St. Louis to knock off Vegas. And honestly, the number one wild card will probably be picked, and I'm saying probably be picked by people, as the one that would end up in the Final Four. So St. Louis would take out Vegas, and then would, if the Battle of California was your other matchup, whoever wins that series would likely not be picked to beat St. Louis if St. Louis beat Vegas. So it is interesting because it is a question to be asked of whether or not, as a Central Division team, is Minnesota better off finishing third, or would they be better off being a wild card team? Would they rather have Vegas than Nashville? I'm not sure on that. Vegas, once Eichel comes back and you get through all of the salary cap mess to make that work, are they going to be a better team? And we don't know the answer yet. That's the fun part. We just do not know the answer yet. And for St. Louis, they do have the cup win from 2019. Again, I think a lot of people would take them in that series. And then you have LA against Anaheim. Now, I've got the Oilers on the board here, and I've pointed out they do have the .583 points percentage. I'm not putting them in the playoffs over Anaheim, though, because then I'd have to do everything by points percentage, which changes everything. And so, and again, the assumption that a team's just going to keep winning at that exact same pace, it doesn't necessarily work that way. So if the LA Kings are playing the Anaheim Ducks, and if LA has home ice advantage, first off, that is a series between two teams that are very, very close to one another. And so you wouldn't have to worry about travel. You wouldn't have to worry about jet lag. I mean, you can joke about it, I guess, going from Anaheim to LA, and I'm all jet lagged. The time difference, it's not a thing. This would be an intense, fight-filled series, honestly, because anytime two California teams play against each other, they really hate each other. It is a pretty amazing ride. Now, if the Oilers do, and right now they've started to turn things around, if the Oilers do end up in the playoffs, and they end up against either LA or Anaheim, I think people would take Edmonton there. And if Calgary does end up being top 2-3, in that 2-3 slot against the Oilers, we all win. We all win if we get the Battle of Alberta this year. I know somehow it won't happen, but if we get a Battle of Alberta first round matchup, every Canuck fan will just sit, popcorn, and watch. Just this is great. This is hit that guy and hit him too, and it could be some great hockey. And I would look for Cassian and Tkachuk to really get to know each other over a 7-game series. And yeah, so as much as two California teams playing against each other means fireworks, so does two Alberta teams playing against each other. So for teams that aren't in the hunt here, you're in, and I'm just labeling the plate for Wright. The tanking that goes on, our season's done, but we might as well get Shane Wright. Now, Montreal currently is at the bottom of the standings. So in a draft lottery situation, they would have the best odds. I do think that with how bad Montreal's season has gone, that we can now make the argument that they probably need Shane Wright even more than Arizona or Buffalo. Buffalo has a lot of pieces right now in their lineup and guys coming up who are going to make Buffalo better. Arizona has so many draft picks this year, and they're going to end up with more, that even if they don't win the draft lottery, they could very well win the draft. They don't have to win the draft lottery. This is a good deep draft. They've got 5 second-round picks and 2 firsts so far. They're going to be fine. Montreal, though, I do think that number 1 pick could really help them a lot. They really need that guy to build around. I love Nick Suzuki. I like some of the young players. I like Cole Caulfield, too. I know Caulfield's had a rough year this year, but he'll turn it around. But yeah, Montreal probably needs Wright more than the others. Ottawa, much like Buffalo, has a lot of good young players either on their roster or coming up. The Seattle Kraken absolutely would love to get Shane Wright. It gives them that prime blue chip prospect, and you add him to Beniers, who should be coming in next year. Yeah, there'd be some salivating for Ron Francis on that one, because that's 2/3 of a line right there, and it would immediately make Seattle better. New Jersey, you could make the argument for New Jersey maybe needing Shane Wright, but the counter argument would be they've already got Jack Hughes. They've got some very good young players now. The Philadelphia Flyers, the Flyers could absolutely use Shane Wright. If Claude Giroux ends up going at the deadline, they're going to need a new guy to step in there. And while I like some of their good young forwards, Wright has that potential to be, the franchise guy they build around. The New York Islanders, they're an old team. The Islanders this year, their age has really shown, and a young star coming in absolutely could help. You pair him with Barzell somehow, that could really help them tremendously. Chicago, you could argue could use a Shane Wright as well, and I know anybody could use him, but I'm just thinking along the lines of how many good young players there are in Chicago, and I do think that blue chip prospect, which Kirby Dach eventually could get back to, but Dach's had that setback this year where it's just he doesn't look the same, and so yeah, Chicago, that dynamic forward that Wright would be, could be huge for them, and just from a marketing perspective as well. Then there's a new guy they can market around for when eventually Kane's going to get older, eventually Taves is going to be older, and they're going to need somebody else to market. Columbus and Winnipeg at 10 and 11. Both of these teams are near the 500 mark, near the NHL 500 mark, and I don't qualify them as necessarily needing a Shane Wright. I will say this, though, for Columbus, having Shane Wright on their roster, winning the draft lottery, remember, the farthest up you can move as of this year now is 10 spots. So anybody who's above Winnipeg, these 4 teams right here, would not be eligible to move up to first overall anymore. So, Winnipeg I don't view as necessarily needing Wright. They're a pretty good team. I'm still not sure why their record is so bad. But Columbus, if they had Shane Wright and they could build around him, and they could have this kid that hopefully would sign a long-term extension for some good cash, that could go a long way towards bringing other guys in. It is remarkable how much a team can go from being one that players don't necessarily want to be traded to or don't really want to play for to, oh, you have him? I'd love to play with him. Let's have a discussion. Edmonton being a good example of, before McDavid, it might have been a lot harder to attract guys there. With McDavid, it's easier. If you're offering a guy a chance to maybe play with McDavid or Draisaitl or even Nugent Hopkins, they're going to look at that and say, wow, or all 3 of them. Yeah, that's going to be an attractive option because that should boost your stats, and who knows, you might make more money later from it. So there you go. My pick right now, if the Stanley Cup playoffs were starting now, it is hard not to pick Tampa. It is hard not to argue that the Tampa Bay Lightning are still, in a playoff scenario, most likely to win. Colorado is due for a breakthrough and that chance to finally compete for the Stanley Cup again for the first time since 2001 in a Stanley Cup final. But yeah, Florida, if they can translate the explosive offense they have in the regular season into the playoffs, unstoppable's not really what they'd be, but boy, would they ever be entertaining. And then if you had Florida come out of this division, Carolina come out of this division, That would be, I think, one of the best Final Four conference final series we've seen in a long time. And on this side, if it was Colorado and Vegas meeting for the second year in a row, it could be very entertaining as well. But that's the question I have for people: is if these were your teams, if these are the teams that are playing against each other in the playoffs, who would be your Final Four? Who do you think would win the Stanley Cup? And then the question of, at this point in the year, is Montreal the team that most needs Shane Wright in the 2022 draft? Or can you make an argument for someone else? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.